All right, what's going on, everyone? We're back for episode 5 of Unclassified. I'm Preston Stewart, joined by Ben Wheeler. This is our first time doing 2 in a week, but I think it fits right now because there's a lot happening. Fortunately, I kind of feel like things in Syria have died down a little bit. We'll get into more of that here in a minute. But Ben, appreciate you taking the time,
Yes,
man. There's a
sir.
handful of things here that what I've started to do is lean on you for some of this information. It helps me get through the week knowing that I don't have to try to tackle all of these things myself. I like it.
Well, I lean on you as well for Syria in the Middle East because I am lost there. But let's start off with Ukraine and President-elect, the 47th President of the
Yeah,
United States,
yeah, and
Donald John
this
Trump.
this is where I have some questions for you because we're kind of getting into the mix, and I think it's the conversation worth having. But it's a mix of things Trump is saying and talking about. We haven't had that in this conflict for a long time. The U.S. policy, for better or for worse, however you view it, has been pretty consistent. Also, I dinged up
hmm
2 fingers for anybody
Yeah,
watching.
what happened?
Um, I'm not going to be able to hide that. So I cut a finger just being sloppy on the cutting board. And then when I was trying to not use that finger, I put the other one in the way the next day. So got a good thing going. And I have a 6-year-old daughter. So the only Band-Aids we have looks like pink cherries and then solar systems. So
Nice.
that's,
Well,
that's,
I guess
that's where I'm at.
what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah. User error. So anyways, for a long time, there hasn't been a lot of talk about like what might come in terms of the following policy because the Biden administration, they have been back and forth to a degree, but we're talking about a big possible change here with Trump. And it feels like a lot of the conversation in the last couple of weeks has been all over the board. Like he's meeting with Zelensky, he's kind of threatening Putin at times, but then also we see threats against Zelensky. So, or in terms of like cutting off munitions, can you get us up to speed? Where does this stand? What's the general thought right now as to how the war will change when Trump comes into office?
Well, so he just won Time Person of the Year, which for him might be as much of a big deal as winning the presidency. And so, as being Time Person of the Year, you do an interview. And he kind of outlined his policy going forward. And so, one of these is that Trump, he opposes missile strikes into Russia that Ukraine does. I've seen media outlets adopt it as he opposes U.S. munitions being sent into Russia to like fire at it. I don't take it that way because he never clarified. Although perhaps that is what he's talking about. I don't know. But he says it escalates the war, and that was a really dumb decision. I don't buy it. He also said he wanted to use U.S. aid as a part of negotiations with Putin to end the war. That like the idea that if he doesn't agree to peace, he'll give Ukraine more aid. But then he told Macron and Zelensky that he opposes Ukrainian membership into NATO, but he wants a strong, well-armed Ukraine, but in the same conversation warned them to expect less aid from the United States. He also wants European troops... Oh, go ahead.
Well, okay, I have a couple questions. You said you don't buy the no strikes into Russia. I don't follow that. As in, you don't think he was talking about U.S. munitions, or can you expand on that?
Yeah, so I don't buy he's only talking about U.S. weapons. I think he's talking more generally because
Okay.
as far as I know, I've covered him for 3 years now. He has always been against missile strikes into Russia. I don't think it's related to just U.S. munitions. I think it's munitions in general, strikes in general. So that's why I don't buy it. But for this peace deal here that he wants European troops to peacekeep, which is Macron went to Warsaw recently and said, well, look, he went to Warsaw, he met with them, and he said, okay, let's send 40,000 troops to Ukraine after the war, and Poland put a big no on it. They said, we're not talking about that. But, I mean, you've seen the song and dance of the European leaders before, right? They all talk about this thing, and then Macron says it out loud, and everyone gets mad and says he's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? Which is, how this whole war has gone. But in this interview, he also admitted that getting a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia within 24 hours, like he promised, is a more difficult task than he thought. It happens. And so there's that. Spain kind of came out against him and said, well, look, I think he's completely lost if he thinks he's going to end this war within 24 hours, which is Spain is not a country you really think about, right? I mean, we know they're NATO, but in terms of this general Ukraine mix, they don't really talk a whole lot about it. But this came as NATO was warning that we have to shift to a wartime mentality. So that's kind of where this all sits right now. In this Time interview and in the Meet the Press interview from last Sunday, he reiterated that so long as NATO countries are, quote, paying their bills, then he won't leave the alliance. It's important to note that he does not have the authority to leave the alliance, as per the National Defense Authorization Act of 2023 or 2024. So, also the idea of paying bills doesn't really make sense because they don't pay bills. I'm not trying to give him a diss track here. I feel like when you repeat what he says and he's wrong, you have to say it, right? So I do the same for Biden.
So to kind of spin that the other direction, then a lot of the pushback on, and I did have, but will continue to push back on the idea that the war will be over in 24 hours in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people who've been following the conflict, anybody who's been following the conflict, knows that that's not reasonable and that's not a partisan issue. There's not like one lever that can be pulled to end this war from our perspective. I would argue that Putin has it within his ability to end the war in 24 hours if he so chooses. I don't think Zelensky does, because I think even if Zelensky were to make a decree that the war is over, I think you probably would have some factions inside of Ukraine that would say, we are not going to stop fighting. I don't know. And interpret that however you will, but I don't think there's a single thing the United States can say or do that will end the war and create a lasting peace inside of 24 hours. I think we might be able to, we do have a lot of things in terms of, and this is still interesting to see people in Ukraine and Russia kind of back and forth over what direction is it going to take. There is still very much a lively debate with Russian mill bloggers about concern that Trump is just going to send more weapons, that his diplomacy is going to be, Putin, you need to cede on some of your demands, or I'm going to increase arms shipments to Ukraine, because he wants to win and wants to show that he has the upper hand and somebody can't tell him no. That's a very real concern inside of Russia. And of course, a real concern inside of Ukraine is the exact opposite. That Trump is going to come in and say, you have to negotiate today, find an end to this war, or we are going to stop all future shipments. And there's going to be no discussion of NATO. There's going to be no European peacekeepers. Either way, I think it's worth bringing up. 24 hours has always been unrealistic, maybe from, February 23rd on or about. I mean, I understand that it was a talking point. It was kind of a way of Trump to say, I could do this quickly. But I hopefully the war can be brought to a close, a just close. But I wouldn't expect anything to happen quickly as soon as he enters office.
I think the 24-hour point, like you're right, it's always been unrealistic, but it's also been one of those things where, I don't know, he said it, and if you're not his biggest fan, like Spain may not be, it kind of is fun to, like throw dirt at him a little bit over it, even if it is unrealistic, even if it is entirely unhelpful. But I think that's kind of where Spain's coming from there. But no, I agree with you. Do you think, let me ask you this. So right now he's saying he's going to cut off aid. He's not going to give any more aid. So what I'm gathering is you think those in Ukraine and perhaps yourself think that maybe he will give more aid to Ukraine as a way to win.
Well, this actually goes back to the second question I was going to ask was, how much does this even matter, discussing all of this? Because it does feel like it's all over the place at this point. And I don't know that I would put greater odds in one direction or the other, per se. It does seem like more of his conversation, and more of the people that he surrounds himself with, for the most part, tend to lean towards less aid to Ukraine. But I don't think you can discount all possibilities right now. And again, inside of Russia, what we're seeing is a lot of concern that Trump's negotiation method is going to be wanting to come from a position of power. But to kind of bring it back there, is this even worth talking about? Like, the way you just laid out all the different things he's saying and discussing and presenting, I feel like you said 16 different things in 17 different directions. Like, I don't know that I can take anything coherent from that at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of how he talks. Yeah. It's he said everything every which way in this interview. In these interviews, it's kind of hard to know where he stands on it, especially as you're right. Some of the people he's surrounding himself with do go for less aid, but then his national security team is very pro-Ukraine, pro-free world, pro-U.S. hegemony. So I don't know. I think it is perhaps cause for concern. I mean, his son posted a video showing his dad, POTUS, kicking Zelensky in the head to take his place on the Time magazine cover, which is, I would like to note, Zelensky was not the person of the year last year. It was Elon Musk, wasn't it? So
I don't know.
Zelensky
I actually thought the Trump thing was, I didn't realize that was real. I am not up to date on the Time Person of the Year, so I thought that was just like a meme. I didn't realize it was an actual thing.
No, he became Time Person of the Year again. And in 2023 it was Musk, and then 2022 it was Zelensky. I think it was Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. So, yeah. So he, I mean, I don't know. We know where his son stands. As for Trump, who knows? But I do know this. Congress has requested intel assessments on Ukraine aid suspension to kind of find out what the impact will be and how it will embolden our adversaries. So that'll be interesting to see what comes of that. But that is the current Congress, although control did not change. So who knows?
It's a good conversation to have. It's a conversation that I expect has been happening from day one. The way all of these decision-making processes would have worked is not we are going to do this thing no matter what. There would have been a counter, and what if we don't? And what does the other side of this look like? So my guess is they'll be able to pretty quickly put together an assessment of what cutting off aid would look like, because that should be, unless this is a very, very unique situation, there should be a counter to that, to all of the programs at this point to make that argument.
My guess as to how it goes going forward with Trump and aid is I think it kind of mirrors his first presidency, where I think he's going to have a showdown of Congress, and the pro-Ukraine faction of Congress will win, and he will have to, I think it'll kind of be like the border wall, right, where he will have to agree to the aid to Ukraine in exchange for one of his other things, whether it's his mass deportation efforts or maybe getting his own FBI director. I don't know. But I think that will be the deal at hand.
It's a piece of a larger deal.
Yeah, I think it'll be a piece of a larger deal. I do think it'll probably, because of that, though, I think it'll be dramatically less aid. Because it helps now that part of Congress is for Ukraine. I guess most of Congress, and the president is. But if the president's against it, you kind of have to negotiate for it. So I think that's kind of the issue here.
What's interesting, there's also a hatred of Zelensky within a certain portion of, I would say, Trump supporters. Seems to be more on that side, but it's interesting to see, because I don't think there's an easy way to walk back from that into supporting Ukraine long term. Zelensky's been painted as a villain, and I'm not entirely sure how that's resonated so well, but it has. And I think it would be, I mean, I don't know, I guess all politicians kind of just change with the wind, right? Decide today, actually, I'm going to be for this thing or against it. But it seems like Zelensky's been painted as such a bad guy and like an enemy of the United States that I'd be hard. It's a little bit hard for me to see the next administration really getting on board with backing Ukraine in the same way that we have over the last couple of years.
What do you think? And I should say, the only people I've really seen dislike Zelensky are Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr. Do you think that the dislike for Zelensky stems from the first impeachment attempt?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure where it started or the origination. I mean, you just brought it up a second ago, right? The meme of Zelensky getting kicked in the head by Trump. Like, there's a dislike there, a hatred.
I don't get it. He seems to me very brave. He says all the right things. He thanks the United States for the aid regularly. He embodies everything we want in a leader in America, right? I mean, especially when the invasion happened. Remember, he's out there in the streets. I don't need a ride. I need ammunition. All this. And they seem to not like him. I don't quite know why. Because if any other time period, this man would be like Churchill, at least in the United States. He would be our Johnny Appleseed. So I have no idea why they don't like him.
It has led to some good memes in the last week where you had Zelensky, I don't need ammo, I don't need a ride, I need ammo, to Assad, I need a ride. It's been
seeing this.
Yeah.
I keep seeing this fake Russian news account on Twitter, and I always fall for it. And it's like Bashar al-Assad announces on Russian social media he'll be starting his own podcast. And I fall for it every time.
Because the logo is like RT for Russia Today, and the name of the account is like Russia Today in English or something. It's like,
yeah.
Do you remember right when Musk took over X and like just opened up that verification thing, and people were like,
yep.
Great, I'm just gonna buy like Eli Lilly, and started like somebody bought Raytheon, the real Raytheon or something, and started tweeting out about like the F-35 program because they spent $8 on a verified check. That's kind of what you're seeing there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I always fall for it. And I was like starting a podcast.
Love it. I'm here for it. Yeah.
Right. And then I saw something that said he's going to go back to being an eye doctor. And I was like, what? So I don't know. Shout out to Bashar al-Assad, friend of the pod. If he ever wants to come on, not a friend of the pod. If he ever wants to come on, let us know. So
on that note, we put out a request yesterday and said we're going to answer 3 questions based off the top liked comment on a post I put out on Twitter, X, TikTok, and YouTube. I'm going to dive into those now. How you feel about that? I haven't looked at them yet. All right, so I got to pull them up live as we're going here. I'll do the first and the third start. You do the second one. I'm starting with X. Let's see.
What platform do you want me to look
these
for?
Could be in any direction. All right. Top liked. Do you see HTS disbanding and becoming a political party in democratic Syria or no? If so, what happens to the militants? Do they disband or remain as the new Syrian army or a mix of the both? That's from Bus Maddie on X. And look, it got 1 like. So if you're looking to get questions answered on this one, I guess X is the platform, because I think there was more on YouTube and TikTok. So Matt, I do actually think HTS is going to disband to a degree, at the very least rename. It sounds like what they're trying to do is stand up kind of a new government in Syria. And I don't think they're going to try to make it look like a rebrand of HTS. Based off of what we're seeing at this point, it looks like they're going to try to kind of separate themselves. And that's going to be like the wartime entity that was needed. And now you're going to see a peacetime government of sorts. That's my gut. The militants, I think, will become kind of like what we saw with the Taliban in Afghanistan. You're going to see them move around. The local commanders will end up as semi-government officials in certain areas, but a lot of them will move into a police force, paramilitary force, some sort of defense force, which raises a big question. Who's going to be there to help them actually stand up, train, and equip some sort of military going forward? Ben, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you got any thoughts on that one?
I agree with you on your entire analysis. I'm not fully read up on it, but I'd take your word for it. I do have the next question, though.
Okay, which one is this on?
This is from YouTube. This is the top liked one. 17 likes. Have you ever been approached by any governmental 3-letter organizations?
I like we went straight from like a relevant topical national security question to, who asked that question? Let's make sure we throw the username out there.
Let me pull up the name. Thor 101 or
Thor 101.
Okay. 1. Yeah. Yep.
I'll start this one. I have not. Since doing this type of work, I applied to the FBI back in a past career. I was working at a real estate firm, applied to the FBI just like as a regular dude off the street, and was making it through that process, and actually stepped away to move to Tennessee to start a daycare with my wife. So we were like, I don't know if we could run a business and be, the FBI is just going to send you wherever they want to send you. Yeah. So made the choice at that point to not work for a 3-letter agency, if we call the FBI a 3-letter agency. Since doing this work, no. The only government contacts I've had were the stuff through NATO, but that's technically through a marketing firm.
And four letters too.
And 4 letters. Yeah, but I'm trying to see if I'm trying to be as open as possible with all this. Or just I can be, so may as well put it all out there.
Right.
But all the NATO stuff, I've been pretty as transparent as I can. Like, they don't tell us what to post or any, can't say anything like that. No editorial control. I have met people through this at state and DOD and at the White House. That was all facilitated by NATO. And I stayed in touch with the DOD people, which is why I went on the trip last week. But across the board, all of those are unpaid. There's no content moderation, anything like that. Nothing beyond that. So all of my contacts at this point have been, I think there's one dude from state that reached out asking if I wanted to learn more about like their protection services at embassies overseas. But it was just a dude that watched the channel and liked what we do. Like, that didn't go anywhere. So pretty boring, maybe, is the answer. What about you, Ben? Who's your contact at CIA or Mossad?
They slide out a long piece of paper each day under my door full list of talking points. NATO's only ever come to me and asked me to speak at their youth summit twice now, and asked me to come to other events. I do it voluntarily. They don't pay me to do anything. If I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't do it. Generally speaking, the whole reason the American population believes Russian Chinese propaganda is because American 3-letter agencies don't operate domestically. Like the FBI does, but they don't operate a propaganda machine domestically. That is why we get our lunch eaten. There's this whole belief that our way of life, our way of thinking is ultimately correct and is right and is unimpeachable, and therefore it will always win. So there's no need to pay influencers, pay journalists to do that. Now, that's not always been the case, right, in the 50s and 60s, but it's been since then, since the Church Committee, I believe, right, where they had this whole big hearing in front of Congress and they all got in trouble. They don't do that. I would be very surprised if there were any influencers who were CIA, NSA, anything like that. I highly doubt that exists.
I think that's giving our government too much credit, if I'm being honest. The way
I don't think they have
through a lot of this. Yeah,
they have no clue, especially when you talk to them about like social media and stuff like that. Now, I'm not talking to CIA about social media. When you talk to people surrounding it, right, surrounding the government apparatus about it, they have not a clue.
Think tanks, analysts, defense companies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are clueless. So, no, I have not been approached. Maybe I would like to be approached, but
we're looking for a sponsor on the channel here. So
the CIA wants to sponsor us. Well, hit us up.
I can't even begin to pronounce these names, but Dolph Fukarobe on TikTok, 21 likes, said, "How are you? I'm doing great. It's a good Friday start. We will get to another question. Ben, you doing okay?"
Yeah, I'm doing swell.
All right. So the next liked question was from Gotta Like Mangoes, which checks out. Do you think Trump will force negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? Ben, lead us off with that one.
I think he'll try to. I don't know how he's going to force them to do it. I don't think Russia particularly cares for this. And I think just simply to prove a point, he's going to demand they come to the negotiation tables, and Russia's going to say no. And so it's just going to be Ukraine there. I think the more important question is, when Russia refuses negotiations, does Trump abandon Ukraine? Not can he force peace negotiations? I think Russia's not a peer-to-peer adversary of the United States, but unless the United States is going to deploy to Ukraine, you're not going to force Vladimir Putin to do anything. What about you?
Yeah, my thought is we're going to see more of an effort under this administration to bring an end to the war. When you look back at the time since the invasion kicked off, there really have not been a lot of efforts to end the war. There's been efforts to keep Ukraine armed and in the fight and able to defend themselves. But it's I think a criticism. I think it's a valid criticism of the Biden administration is, what does an end to this war look like, and how are we getting there? because the way that we've kind of trickled aid into that country has allowed them to maintain, their readiness to a degree and hold the lines in certain areas. But like, we're not close to an end of the war, certainly not on Ukraine's terms today. So I think we're going to see an increased focus like we haven't seen before on bringing about an end to the conflict. I'll leave it at that. I don't know the direction that'll necessarily take at this point.
Do you think the reason that the Biden administration was less about going for peace compared to this Trump administration is a level of perhaps naivete or arrogance, maybe, that perhaps Joe Biden is much more of a realist about the situation, whereas Trump believes he can fix it in one go? Do you think that factors in at all?
Hard to, yeah, I don't know. The hyper pessimistic side of me has always thought that a long war for Russia actually benefits the United States at the detriment of the Ukrainian people. The longer they're bogged down, the longer they're tied up, the more expensive it becomes, the more lives they lose, the more damage to their economy, the more damage to their image on the international stage. Like, there's a lot of benefits to the United States for Russia to fight a 10-year war in Ukraine. That's very pessimistic, but it's something that I've regularly thought about.
No, you're right, but I think it's worth saying that just because it benefits the United States doesn't mean it's inherently bad. That makes sense, right?
Bad
like
for the
Ukraine still wants, right, but they still want to fight.
Yeah, but that argument of dragging it on means that we are going to send tanks, but we're going to wait and kick that down the road for 18 months. And we are going to send ATACMs, but we're going to wait until after they would have been most effective during the counteroffensive. All sorts of things like that.
I see your point. Okay, so you're saying
intentionally dragging it out.
I see. I thought you meant just the war going on in general. Okay. No, I agree. Do you think the Biden administration is purposefully dragging it out? Or do you think they're using a flawed...
That's the hyper-pessimistic view. Yeah.
I think... Yeah, I agree. I think they're using a very flawed theory of escalation that just doesn't make sense. But maybe they are dragging it out. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, next topic then?
Yeah, let's get into Syria, and then we'll switch back. I want to hear some of your thoughts on this drone stuff, because, God, feels like depending on who you follow, it's either an invasion or fake. So I'm excited. I'm going to find out where you land on that. So Syria, good news, bad news situation, which is probably going to be the case for a while. HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is the group that led this offensive. They have since taken over governance. And Jesus, man, they came in ready to go. So, like, they have opened up bus services, Ben, from northern Syria through Idlib into Damascus. So, like, there are bus routes open now in areas where, like, buses previously could, bus routes. They're like, hey, you need to travel? Good news, HTS bus. Like, buses are up and running. They brought in the equipment to stand up bakeries in areas that were newly liberated. They added power to portions of cities and towns that hadn't had very much, if any, power for long periods of time. Like, they're cleaning the streets. They're doing a lot of the right things. In fact, they did a press conference at one point where behind the interim leader, they had a free Syrian flag, and right next to it, I'm not going to say the name because I can't ever remember it correctly, but it was a jihadi-looking flag. My understanding is it's a flag used by a lot of different groups, kind of bastardized by, like, Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. But to Westerners, it's a flag, and we go, wait a minute, what is that? A religious-looking flag.
Right.
And people thought, that's not what we want to see. And the next day, they took it down. And the next day, it was just the Syrian flag. So interpret that however you will. We caught them. We actually saw what their intentions were, or they're listening and paying attention and saying, that's not a good thing. You got all that. That's positive. We are, in the negative camp, seeing more extrajudicial killings. We're seeing some executions. We're seeing senior officials within the Assad regime hunted down and killed. It does sound like there's some of that happening in the outskirts, smaller towns. There may be some minorities that are being persecuted. Yes.
Is
Ben,
killing former officials... Yes, I do have a question. Sorry, raising my hand. For the listeners, I did raise my hand like a schoolboy for some reason. Anyways, I have a question though. Is killing former officials a bad sign?
I think it is.
Weren't the Japanese and German officials killed after World War II?
It's the way that they're being killed. So there's no formal
okay.
process. There's no hearings. There's no trials. It's being hunted down, and we've seen some public hangings, shootings, things like that. So
Gotcha.
I'm not saying that they're good people or they deserve to live a free life, anything like that. But I would argue that right now, I just don't think we want to see that anywhere.
Right.
Now, I think you could make the argument that that's better or less worse than civilians. Sure, got it. But generally speaking, if we're talking about rule of law, which is what Syria is under the gun for now, just taking over, I think that is something to keep an eye on. Now, there was something here. Did you see we talked last episode about the prison that was uncovered, the Syria prison?
I did.
Yeah. I have started and stopped a video about that because I feel like I have a lot of questions, and I think there's a lot of bad information floating out around that right now. And CNN, I don't know if you saw this clip went viral, had a reporter go in. Did you see this clip?
Clarissa Ward is her name. Yes, I did see this.
I think it's fake.
Really?
Yeah. So
I
should
really
link
like
that
her.
clip.
Why do you think it's fake? Yeah.
Let's link that. We'll link that clip in the description so people can check it out. It just doesn't sit right. And this is where I'm having a hard time with the video right now because Syria prison is notoriously awful. Countless people were disappeared there, tortured, killed, brutality beyond our wildest imaginations. However, there have already been a couple things that just feel a little bit off about the stories coming out, and that's one of them. I'll get into a couple others here in a second. But the white helmets went through the prison talking about, we searched every nook and cranny to find people. There are people across Syria holding out hope still today that their family members that went missing 10, 15 years ago might pop up. They might find them in some underground secret compartment in these prisons. Like, they are combing through that in every possible way with like civilians at the gates waiting for their loved ones. And then a CNN reporter gets escorted in with a camera crew and a guard. They open a cell that hasn't been opened yet and find a guy in there underneath a blanket who immediately is open to doing an on-camera interview and doesn't look all like, what? Like, we're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of Syrians, including the white helmets, whose job it has been for 10 plus years to find bodies and to find the living in places underneath rubble and in, cellars after they've been bombed out. They ran dogs through there and couldn't find any more people. And then a CNN reporter finds one. It doesn't smell right.
I'll take your word for it. I mean, I saw the clip. I didn't think anything of it, but I mean, that would be crazy if it's fake. I remember when she was in Afghanistan and she was in Kabul when the Taliban entered, and she was like bossing them around, and they were like listening to her. It was kind of crazy to watch live. But this is disappointing if she's faking.
I don't know if she
videos
is. I should be clear on that.
Okay.
Right? You could also see a scenario where the opposition forces, HTS, is like, what we need to do? It'd be great.
Yeah.
Let's get one of those Western journalists over there to find a prisoner. Like, that'll, right? You can kind of see that being a valid argument. So that makes me a little uneasy. And there's a couple other things here as well. And I like being able to talk about this in a long form conversation because in a video, I'll just get a lot of hate notes and death threats. So there was an American found yesterday.
Austin Tice?
No.
Was it Austin? No, it wasn't Austin Tice.
It was a different American that said he was a Christian, walked into Syria, walked towards Damascus, got arrested 7 months ago, and has been held in this prison. And it's like, it's SCIA?
Ooh.
Because it came out and the U.S. was like, we have no idea who this person is. So it's like, really? Like, no friends, no family, nobody. And the dude, he was definitely held in prison, but
why was he walking to Damascus? Did he give a reason? Do we know why?
There were brief interview parts. I watched a little bit here and there, but it sounded like he was kind of on a journey, and I don't know. Like, an American was captured in Syria, detained in Syria, and we had no idea. Nobody at all knew about that at all. That was a little weird. And then the last one here, and all of these could be true, and I could be the idiot. So, like, let's be clear on that. The last one here is in the prison. They showcased this thing that they say is a press to flatten the bodies after they're hung.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I can't understand how that makes sense. Like, that seems like what? That sounds awful, but it seems like it's a way to make something more messy and harder to clean up than it is. So
I've seen people suggest they did it, like put the body in a bag and did it, but I was writing a story on this and I ultimately canned it because I expressed kind of the same reservations you did. I believe everything people say is happening in the prison, but when it came to the iron press, I was like, I don't know, right? I was quite uncertain on the details because you're right. Wouldn't there be blood underneath it? But then people said there are blood channels. And
but that just makes the whole thing more messy, more complex. I don't understand. Like, that seems like the opposite of what you're trying to do. Like, in what scenario we are? What's the percent of water our body is made up of? Right? Like, if you compact this down into a small ball, you're just going to have a mess everywhere. Like, I don't understand how that does anything other than create more problems. So again, could be true. Maybe it was a torture device used to, like, make people incredibly uncomfortable, right? Like, I'm not going to put any of that by the Assad regime. They did horrible shit. And there's plenty of examples already of, like, just the atrocious ways they treated their prisoners. I don't want to discount any of that. My goal is to document that as best I can in a video at some point. But right now, I feel like it's a little bit too early, and I'm seeing too many things that just send off little alarm bells, and I have no way of, like, that flat press, I have no way to confirm it. So I'm just hesitant to, or confirm or deny, right? Like,
no, I mean, I agree with you. I saw a Syrian analyst, like the one everyone's referring to, say that the rumors were true about the iron press, but I couldn't find anyone talking about the iron press. It wasn't talked about in the Amnesty report or the Red Cross report from years past. So I don't know. Maybe it's very real, like you said. I'm not casting doubt either which way. I'm just saying, from my standards, I didn't feel comfortable writing a story about it because I was like,
to give it a little time.
I can't immediately determine what is true and what's not.
All right, bright side. It's a bad transition.
Yeah, wow.
Bright side. There's no way to do that. There's no way to go from torture devices to anything else. We're going to try, and we'll just see in the analytics. That's where everybody falls off. Hamas has said that they are open to Israeli soldiers, staying in the Gaza Strip after a ceasefire. That is the first time they've suggested that they're open to that since October 7th, since the first talks of any sort of ceasefire. It's been a major sticking point, and like 2 days ago, that came out. Hamas is actually ceding a little bit. We might see a ceasefire.
Oh, well, how many members of Hamas are left? Is it like 4 guys? I mean, what's their strength at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to risk a number there, but they are in a bad way, and all of their buddies are in a bad way. So, I mean, since Hamas began this war, 3 months ago, per se, Sinwar was alive, Mohammed Deif was alive 4 months ago, within the last 6 months. Some of their key leadership was alive. They were still fighting in Gaza. Hezbollah was up and running and causing major issues in the north. And Syria was facilitating arms shipments to Hezbollah to keep up their fight with Israel. That's all changed. It's a very different battlefield right now for Gaza. So it's not crazy that they're looking at that going, you know what? We don't hold all the cards anymore.
It's interesting. Did you see... what's his name? I saw a clip of some dude on Twitter saying that it's really annoying being on the other side of Israel because all they do is win and nobody cares. That, like, they eliminated Hezbollah, they've taken out Hamas, they're now in Syria, and as he calls it, they just keep getting these wins, and no one cares. They just do whatever they want, and no one cares. I was pretty humored by it.
When
I don't know
you
if
say
see
no one
that,
cares,
but
like they don't get credit, like that kind of.
no, like he was saying that basically Russia invades Ukraine, everyone cares. Israel goes and conquers the highest mountaintop in Syria, no one cares, and they just keep winning. And I thought that was pretty funny. I mean, obviously it's not the same. I think the guy is a white supremacist, so I think that is important to note. Nick Fuentes, I think his name is.
Seems like a important detail for the context.
It is
there.
an important detail. Once I started speaking, I realized perhaps I need to mention this because, but yeah, so there's that. But no, I mean, a ceasefire would be good. It would have been great about over a year ago. I don't know why Hamas kept fighting. I don't know. I mean, Netanyahu got what he wanted here in this election. So that's interesting. Do you think, let me ask you this, pivoting from Israel and Palestine here, do you think that Israel will move to annex the West Bank due to President Trump? What did he say? He said he's open to it, them annexing the West Bank?
Yeah, so that's we're getting a little far into Israeli domestic politics, so I got to tread carefully. I barely understand U.S. domestic politics. So when I say tread carefully, it's just I don't want to get out over my skis and talk about shit I don't know about. My understanding is that there are some calls for that inside of Israel from some of the more extreme members of Netanyahu's government. I don't know how much support there is for that across the rest of the country. However, when it comes to support from the United States, Trump has put together arguably like the most pro-Israel cabinet in our lifetime. So, like, if they want to do something like that, it seems like the stage is kind of set. And again, when you're looking at it from a security perspective for Israel, Hamas is not eliminated, but they are a fragment, a shell of what they were at the start of this war. Hezbollah has agreed to a ceasefire. There's been some violations, but all of their leadership has been eliminated, and a lot of their firing points and defensive positions in southern Lebanon destroyed. Who knows what's going to happen with Iran, but from my perspective, Iran has been humbled a couple times by Israel, kind of showing that they cannot stand toe-to-toe in any sort of conventional fight. Assad is down, and all of the Iranian-backed militias across Syria kind of looks like they went back to Iraq, is what it looks like to me. So a lot of, Israel's security concerns are not gone. They're drastically changed from where they were not long ago, which maybe frees up the time for them, the time and the resources to do something like an annexation of the West Bank. So maybe the conditions are set, is what I could say.
Do you think this would be good? Like, I assume this will be condemned by the international community, such a move, right? I can't assume annexation is, because everyone's in agreement needs to be a two-party or two-state solution.
Israel gets condemned when they sneeze.
Yeah.
So like
that is very true.
It will be condemned for sure. But does it matter? Honestly, it hasn't really stopped anything at this point. And again, you've got a very pro-Israel United States coming in. So
that's true. I don't have a stance on their annexation. I think so long as the Palestinians want it and they're given equal voting rights, I don't see the issue. But I assume they don't want it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Hamas just doesn't want it. I don't know. But speaking of Hamas, their owner, Iran, what's happening there, Preston?
Yeah, interesting stuff with Iran right now. So Jelani, the leader of HTS, has supposedly reached out to Iran. Looks like some public statements saying we're on the same team in the sense that we are all Muslim and we want to get along in accordance with those principles. It sounds like he's not threatening Iran at all, but we haven't seen anything from Iran related to the fall of Assad really at all. They put out some kind of propaganda statements about like this doesn't affect our ability to influence the region, and like we actually didn't have forces there. It was really the Syrian army that fell apart. But it's a big question because the one of the main reasons that Syria was so important for Iran is it allowed a land route from essentially from Iran through Iraq through Syria, the land bridge into Lebanon. So it was a major chunk of the Middle East that Iran had control over. And they had friendly groups, Iranian-backed militias, proxy forces, whatever you want to call it, scattered throughout. They probably just lost a lot of that. At the very least, it's been degraded. So we haven't seen yet what they're going to do, or if they're going to do anything, or if they can do anything. So I would say right now, Iran's kind of a question mark. I put them in the same category as Turkey when it comes to the issues in the Middle East right now. They have a lot of influence, haven't really done much following the fall of Assad. Can't imagine they're going to sit on the sidelines forever. But yeah, nothing major out of Iran related to that.
Do you think, so I've been seeing these things about HTS, SDF. They made some kind of agreement. They're saying Syria is united. What's that all about?
Mixed bag. You're seeing a lot of individuals talk like that. Jelani's been big on that from the very start. So a lot of the language coming out of HTS has been unifying in nature. And I should say, just the always the caveat, HTS, the designated terrorist organization here in the United States, but they have been really leading with the messages of unification. And the news then is when these other groups kind of speak out and say, okay, we're on board or we're not. We're not really seeing any fighting at this point between HTS and the SDF. It's relatively calm across the board. But that's a big question. If you look at any maps right now of Syria, it's still broken out into two sections. You've got what they call the opposition forces or new Syrian forces or whatever. Jelani and HTS is like the entire western and southwestern portion. And then the entire east, northeast, and north, mostly north, is Turkish-aligned forces. Kurdish forces is a better way to put it. So the SDF in portions, and then the SNA and others. So it's still a divided country. We just have to wait to see. I think that's a big question. How that will actually be rectified? Will they be able to work together?
Interesting. And I saw that the SDF and the Turkish-backed forces are violating the ceasefire, or at least the Turks are, and attacking the Kurds. Thoughts?
That's where we get into this. The challenge that Jelani and HTS is going to have is how are they going to be able to stop that? If this is actually the government in Syria right now, I almost said Afghanistan because I'm thinking of the similarities with the Taliban. Like, do they have the ability to police their own territory and show that they are a sovereign state? And look, if Turkey and the SNA are able to go after Kurds in the north, the answer is no. And I don't think that's really a surprise at this point. Again, like they're still kind of reeling. There's major celebrations in Damascus right now. Like this morning, videos came out of thousands, tens of thousands of people flooding the streets, celebrating the fall of Assad. So they're still very much in that honeymoon period. But we'll see. I don't think, we've seen Israel kind of go on the offensive to a degree, offensive defense, if you will, in the south, moving into the buffer zone, striking, essentially eliminating the entire Syrian Air Force and Navy in a pretty short period of time because they had the opportunity to do so. It serves their interests short and long term. Turkey has interests up north. It'd kind of be surprising if they don't do anything at all. And I don't know who's going to stop them right now.
Do you see that getting Israeli HTS relations off to a bad start, given that they're eliminating the entire military? Or do you think HTS is like, well,
It sounds like there's been some communication between HTS and Israel. It doesn't look like at this point Israel has targeted any HTS members. From what I've seen, there's been no announcements of HTS fighters killed in these Israeli strikes. It sounds like they're putting out notifications through someone to say like, hey, we're going to hit that airfield. Get your boys out of there. Because like at this point, the number of airstrikes carried out and missile strikes carried out, you would have expected people to have died. But it doesn't sound like that's happened. So I think there's a level of coordination there, especially on these military sites where HTS is going through there just like pulling out whatever they can. But they apparently are able to exit that facility before it goes boom. So there is some degree of coordination there. I kind of get the feeling that Israel and HTS, like, not today's problem, if that makes sense. Like, not
that
friends,
makes sense.
But like, let's just not do this right now.
That makes sense. Do you see Assad breaking his silence anytime soon? We have not heard from him. We know he's in
His
Moscow.
podcast, yeah.
His podcast. Bashir, if you're listening, Basher, you can come on. You can come on the pod.
Riverside is the way to go. Yeah.
Riverside, we'll get you on here. And but that's interesting. He hasn't said anything. Right?
I think there's a chance we don't. I think there's a chance we don't see him or hear from him ever again in any public forum. Like,
do you think it's like? Do you remember like a week? Probably not. This is so old. Like a week after Mitt Romney lost the election, he was he was photographed at CVS buying Cheerios, and it was like so sad. I like Mitt Romney a lot, but it was so sad to see. Do you think that'd just be like how we see Bashar al-Assad again? It's just going to be in like a Russian convenience store.
Yeah, he'll show up on some Russian influencer, like showing a day in the life at a restaurant, and you'll have Assad over there arguing about the check. That'd be great. No, there are still people arguing that his plane was shot down, which I think at this point we can write off as not the case. It was 5 days ago. If there was a plane shot down by the rebels, they'd be dancing on that rubble. And I don't care how little of that plane is left. People would find that little tiny scrap that came from the airplane and show like this is where Assad died. And we haven't seen any of that. So we also haven't seen him in Moscow. Haven't seen him anywhere. Look, like none of the stuff coming out of Syria at this point is good. Like, what does he have to do to get in front of his backers? They're watching these videos come out of these prisons and show like how many people he disappeared, murdered, and executed over the years. They watch his entire government just like fold. Like clearly the guy had no support. Like, what is Iran's not going to want to show him off, right? Russia's not going to want to show him off. It's a reminder to Russia that they weren't able to keep him in power. And like as more of these accusations come out with evidence of his war crimes, like what incentive does he have to be shown around by anybody? I would argue that Putin probably doesn't even want it real public that the guy's in Moscow, right? He's screwed up in a lot of ways, was brutal and was eventually ousted and didn't stand and fight. So I don't know. I think it's possible that he kind of stays under the radar.
Didn't he transfer like 189 billion from Syria to Russia before he fled?
Oh, I don't know.
That's I'm lot. Waiting for the billion. Seems wrong to me. Because that's a lot of money.
But he's also a dictator, and probably like he probably had the password to the country's bank account, right?
That's true. It is interesting. Russia's such an interesting place for asylum seekers. You have Edward Snowden and Bashar al-Assad. What a strange
John McIntyre
crew. John McIntyre. Right? What a weird group of people. Soon probably Tucker Carlson. So
he's did he put his interview out with
who?
Lavrov?
Oh, I don't know.
That was one, right? That's what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, are we expecting something good out of it, or just one?
No, I just didn't know if it had come. I don't know. I actually was looking forward to the Putin interview. So I thought, hey, look, if we're going to get this guy speaking in English, or at least translated in real time in English, asked questions by an American for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it might be, like, cool, let's hear it. Like, you don't have to like what the guy says, but like, I would have been interested in I would have been upset people with this one, but like I would have been interested in like the first interview with Hitler in like 1940 or something, right? Like, okay, what's the dude gonna say? But he just ranted about history for like 3 hours. It was so boring, and there really wasn't anything there at all. So, I don't know.
That's what we said at the time, was that we knew Tucker Carlson, we knew what was going to be going into it, but it was interesting seeing everyone else kind of wake up to the fact that Putin really is just like a Russian Facebook boomer, like no different than our grandparents, just like ranting and raving about things that don't matter and often just lying about it, or not lying, just having no clue.
I was surprised. The thing I was surprised about with that is it seemed like a golden opportunity for Putin to really hammer in certain points that I would say like Tucker might agree with him on, right? NATO expansion, right? Like I thought like that is going to be central to this conversation, and I don't think they even touched on it once. Like it felt like there were a lot of places they could have gone that would have gotten a lot of attention, and people would have been like, ha, there it is, clip that. And they just didn't. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It was interesting to see Putin kind of, what's the word for it? Was it alpha? That sounds toxic. I don't know. Maybe it's just like alpha him, like he just...
You definitely don't want to describe that conversation as toxic. That's right. Yeah, let's be gentle here.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, so it was kind of toxic. I mean, he just... Yeah. Anyways, the drones, though. People
Drones
are going crazy, Preston.
But I
They
can't
are
tell if
going...
it's crazy people going crazy. Because if it is, then I don't... It's, you know...
It has woken me up to... Here's the thing. Either there's something really very real happening here, or the American people are beyond lost. So what's happening is there are drones flying over New Jersey, allegedly. It has resulted in the New Jersey state government going crazy. You have state senators calling for a state of emergency, the governor asking the military to shoot them down. You have, like, they had hearings in front of Congress, and the New Jersey reps are getting very passionately mad about it. The FBI, DOD, they're just like, we don't know who these drones belong to. We don't know of any drones, right? And they're like, you're lying, yada, yada, yada. And then
Wait,
people
so
start
the
posting
DOD is
videos.
saying, like, there's no drones there at all?
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a second. So
okay. All right.
Yeah. So the FBI says, well, we don't know who the drones belong to. We don't even know if there are drones, right? So this is like a whole thing. And then they're like, well, we can't definitively say they aren't a threat at this hearing. And so kind of escalates from there. And then people start posting videos of the drones, and people are like, these are just passenger planes. These are commercial airlines lining up to go into LaGuardia, to go into JFK or Newark Airport, whatever. And people were like, no, they're military drones. So then there was a New Jersey senator, Jeff Van Drew, who was a Democrat in 2016, changed over to being a Republican because his district voted for Trump. So then he changed his party. And so he said, well, look, actually, there's an Iranian mothership off the east coast of the United States that's launching these drones. Right. And so the Pentagon very quickly broke their silence, and they said, no, there are no foreign drones off the coast of the United States. There are no mothership. So, in addition to that, now you have the DOD and Homeland Security and the FBI releasing a statement saying, we have not been able to detect any drones. John Kirby kind of got at this in his White House press conference saying, we haven't been able to detect any drones. There are no drones on the military radar, yada, yada, yada. And then you have the senators, one who's from New Jersey, says that, well, it's because our radars are so old they can't pick them up. So there's like a whole thing going on. And then today, or last night, you saw people going crazy saying that there are drones hovering above LaGuardia Airport, prompting a lot of 911 calls. People say their flight's waiting. But here's the big question. Is this mass hysteria? Is it aliens? I will note, it is interesting that aliens only ever seem to violate American airspace. Is it Iran? Is it China? My guess when I reported on it was that it's a black project, like they're testing something. But the more details that come out about this, the more I'm convinced that it might just be mass hysteria, people going crazy. But that is what is happening here in New Jersey. Apparently, these things are the size of SUVs, as they're saying, and they change direction, like, immediately. They also look like airplanes, but military drones look like airplanes, so I don't really know, what to do with that. But the one thing that is clear is that whatever this is, it is not a hostile entity. But what is it? Does it belong to us? Is this a CIA black project? If you remember the SR-71, the B-2 stealth bomber, the F-117, the U-2, when they're connecting microphones to weather balloons, these all prompted UFO craziness. Is it one of these? I don't know. So what do you think here? What's your read? I have seen people go crazy over this in comment sections, people I know in real life. People are not doing well with these mysterious drones that may actually be passenger planes.
Are there any in Tennessee, or am I safe? Like, Is this something I need to be concerned about here?
As
Or is
far
it
as
just
I
East
know,
Coast?
well, so at first it was just East Coast, but now people are saying, well, I'm seeing them over Pennsylvania. I'm seeing them over California. There were some saying there were some over Chicago. And I should note, I think people are just mistaking them for planes. Like, what do you mean
That's
you
what I
saw
was
them
going to
over
say
Chicago?
is, like, if we're all of a sudden seeing lights over airports at night, like, I don't know, my gut says that's probably the planes. I, I haven't looked at any of the videos or anything, so maybe I'm being an idiot here, but like, that's where lights in the sky usually are.
Right.
So I feel like that's something that we'd really have to push back on. Have you ever been, there's the Top Golf there, near O'Hare in Chicago? And the
I think I have,
planes,
yeah.
yeah. So the planes for
You fly
O'Hare, it's
right
like
over
one
it,
of their
yeah.
approach routes, and it's wild. You just sit there, like, because
Yeah.
you're outside hitting golf balls, and it's like every 6 seconds there's a plane flying. Like, it is crazy how many planes are coming and going through that airport. Like, so if it's at night with the lights on, it's like a never-ending beam of lights, right? It's just constant. So, which looks cool. But yeah, a part of me says, like, airport, gotta question that one. The Iranian mothership thing, what on earth? Where did that come from? Like, who?
Yeah.
Did he just decide, like, I'm gonna say this thing? Because that is very specific.
He said a senior
That's
official
weird.
told him this.
Well, I'm just gonna start reporting based off what senior officials tell me.
Right.
Nobody
Well,
can.
I don't know who the senior official. Right. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, these drones that they're taking videos of have a red and green light on them, right, on each side of the plane,
Airplanes
and they
have
have
that,
the
right?
lights. Yep, they have
Yeah.
the lights underneath that planes use to make sure their wheels are down and what they use to land. So they look like planes, and maybe it is like a black project. They're trying out a new aircraft, but it seems like it might just be mass hysteria, and that's what the Department of Homeland Security seems to think as well, that there is mass hysteria happening here. But like,
I am going to not pay attention to this. Is what I'm going to do, because I feel
will,
like there's too many mixed pieces of information.
Well, I'll say this. The one thing people seem to say is that the drones that are coming into New Jersey and Chicago and California seem to be coming from the ocean and then landing somewhere. This is not a joke. These are people saying this very genuinely. They're coming from the ocean and then landing somewhere on land. It just sounds to me like it's a plane. Like, okay, like, you've landed in...
This is a thing in the night sky with lights near an airport that gets lower.
Yep.
And then eventually stops on the ground.
Dude, there are people describing it as like it keeps descending and then eventually goes below the trees. I'm being serious.
I don't know, man. I feel like we should look into this.
I feel like I mean, you've landed in Chicago, you've landed in New York, you've landed in California before. You know that for the most part, I mean, maybe not in California, but like the East Coast, you're usually, at least landing in Chicago, you're coming in from the lake. I believe the approach to both airports is from the lake. You have to loop around, right? And then on the East Coast here, it's not unreasonable. There are a lot of transatlantic flights. I don't know. Maybe it is aliens, but I will note the interesting thing about aliens is, like I said, they always seem to only harass Americans and only seem to violate American airspace. I don't know why that is. Maybe it is that we travel more than any country on Earth. I think the entire planet combined, we do more travel. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But it is, maybe it's aliens. I don't know. People are going crazy over this stuff.
Yeah, I think that, to me, I'm going to keep my distance. We'll see how that shakes out. I appreciate all of your details there, because that is a bunch of shit I didn't know. I'm not sure that I feel any better, though, because it seems like a lot of crazy. It could be something, but like, it sounds like some of it's a little off the rocker.
I think that there were maybe mysterious drones, and now I think they're just filming commercial airlines. So
I'm gonna drive up to Nashville tonight. I'm gonna spot myself some drones. we'll get this thing going across the country.
As I'm hanging outside O'Hare, look at all these drones flying over me.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The FBI won't answer my calls. All right, let's shift over to some of these cabinet pick topics here in the United States. I actually have something I wanted to lead with on this. Just kind of speak into the general media landscape, if you will. I got a request yesterday, excuse me, from a reporter at the AP asking if I would do an interview talking about if Pete Hegseth is qualified to lead the DoD because of his personal issues. And I respectfully declined because, look, I love AP. I use them as a source all the time. I think they do a really good job. But that feels like such a lightning rod right now. And you and I can talk about it here. And I'm not worried about, I can get everything I want out and kind of stumble my way through how I feel or don't feel about certain topics. But I've done a couple different interviews at this point, big shot, and it always throws me off, what actually makes it in to print or doesn't at all. So I just felt like, you know what? I got it. That's an interesting topic and it's getting a lot of attention right now. I can see why they would want to be running stories on it. I don't want to touch that for a print publication. It just feels like a surefire way to, whatever the most explosive thing I say is probably going to be the thing that gets quoted, right?
No, I mean, it makes sense. So, but what is your real answer, though? Do you think Pete Hegseth is qualified?
We've talked about it before. I wish that we didn't have to look at these personal issues with leaders because they weren't there. So in a perfect world, our leaders were great role models, and our kids could look up to them, and we didn't have to parse through he was drunk at this time and he cheated on his wife this time. I wish that those weren't things that we had to navigate with our leaders, and it's frustrating because there's a lot of people that don't have that baggage. I don't think that's necessary to get to some of these positions. So I wish that it wasn't there at all. In terms of his time or what he could do at DoD, I would like to see more in terms of policy. It seems very much focused at this point on cultural issues, and I don't know that that is the number one issue at DoD. Even if you were to say that it is a very important thing, I think it's hard pressed to say that that's more important than our actual readiness for war with China or nuclear deterrence with Russia or anything like that. So I don't know the guy's opinions on any what I would consider very important national security subjects. So it's not even that I disagree with him on his stance. It's where does he stand on some of this? So to me, I don't like that. I feel like the attention is maybe too hyper focused in an area that maybe isn't the top priority, if you will.
No, I mean, that makes sense to me. That makes total sense. So,
hey, maybe he'll come out with a bunch of different policies, and I'd be happy to talk through those stances and whether that's good or bad. I just haven't seen that quite yet.
What do you think about the showdown of West Point, where West Point confirmed that he had not gotten in there? Is that what happened? They said he didn't go there, even though he claimed he did?
I actually only saw the rebuttal to that, so I didn't see. I don't know the full story. It sounds like some reporter reached out to someone at West Point who said he was never. It feels to me like that's one where the language really matters.
Right.
Did they say he never went there? Because I think that's true. He didn't go there, just fine. I don't think he ever said that he did. So I don't know. Honestly, that was a little too far in the weeds for me to really, really parse out.
Do you want to talk about the other Trump cabinet pick?
Yeah, what do you got?
RFK Jr.? Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Health.
He is the
Hold
son.
on. This is health, right?
Health and Human Services.
Okay.
Yes. Typically, we would not talk about this, but
I was going to say this is a little outside.
Because we have an interesting angle here. He is the son of Bobby Kennedy, who was the Attorney General for John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. And then he was assassinated in 1968 while running for president. So this is his son, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is being accused of being a Russian spy by his cousin, Jack Schlossenberg, who is John F. Kennedy's grandson, which is interesting, right? 31 years old, he writes for Vogue, and he said that you all think I'm joking. I'm not. He didn't elaborate when the media asked him for comment, but instead posted a montage of RFK Jr. alongside Stalin and other Soviet leaders on his Instagram story. So there's that. Important to note, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. does oppose Ukraine. He does oppose the war. He does oppose aid. However, his son, Connor Kennedy, fought in Ukraine when the invasion began. He went there and he enlisted, and he fought on the front lines. He also, Connor Kennedy, also dated Taylor Swift. So for non-Americans listening, the Kennedy family is like the closest you'll get to American royalty. There are very few
Taylor Swift
people.
is kind of American royalty today. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
So the Kennedys, I mean, you had John F. Kennedy, who was assassinated when he was the president, then RFK assassinated in 1968, and then from there, the Kennedy name just, it invokes this sense of a lost era and a sense of nostalgia, and that is Jack Schlossenberg, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is, I believe, kind of been outcasted from his family. But anyways, the idea of Taylor Swift being quite familiar, having spent a lot of time with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is like breaking my brain because those are like two people. It feels like a Mad Lib, right? It's just two people I just never assumed would hang out with each other at all. So kind of an interesting thing there. Calling him a Russian spy. I wonder why. What do you think? Do you think it's just sour grapes from the Kennedy family not liking RFK Jr., or what do you think the deal is here?
Yeah, my gut goes to, that's quite the web you just put together there. My gut is the Russian spy stuff is overplayed, and we've overplayed that. We, the United States, have overplayed that to our detriment, because I do think there's people that have maybe sympathies, or maybe they get too much of their information, for my liking, from Russian or Iranian or even Chinese news sources that has, a focus on maybe disrupting the status here in the United States. I don't like that, but I think that's a far cry from being a Russian spy. I think there's plenty of Americans that probably look at Putin and say, I like what he's doing. He's got a good thing going there. I wish we would be more like him. I don't think they're spies. I think I don't think spy is the term I would use there. They're sympathetic, maybe, is the term. So I think I don't know. Is RFK going to have any impact at all? This human health and human services, right? Like, that shouldn't really have any impact on national security subjects. He's going to be like regulating Big Macs and soft drinks, right?
Yeah, vaccines.
And vaccines.
I guess like it depends on how far you cast like the national security web definition, I guess, if that makes sense. That, like, you could say him getting rid of childhood vaccines does hurt the national security of the United States because it makes us immune to bioweapons, but I feel like that's a pretty far cast.
Yeah. You could also say the other side of it, if we can do away with childhood obesity, we'd open up the ranks to a lot more people that could serve.
That is true. That is
true. I don't know that any one person can solve childhood obesity, but that'd be a good byproduct.
I think you're right. We have overplayed our hand with the Russian spy thing. I think the solution is if we had a Senate committee led by a Wisconsin senator, and only he alone got to accuse people of being spies, and then their whole lives are ruined. I think let's give it a try. It's never happened before, but I think maybe it could work. What do you think?
Sounds like a bold move, Ben. Interested to see.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there.
But you mentioned military recruitment. Right now, we're facing a recruitment crisis. People aren't joining the military. Why do you think this is?
Yeah, so I have drill this weekend, which means that I will miss part of the Army-Navy game, and I don't know how that happened. I feel like that should have been scheduled around, and it wasn't. So
shouldn't they work around it?
I know, but that's my cross to bear. So I'll figure out how to handle that this weekend. I have almost the whole time I've been in, and I entered West Point 2005, then commissioned in 2009. So whether you call West Point Army or not, fine, associated with the military at a military place. I feel like every president is blamed to some degree for the current administration is always blamed for anything that's not going well in the military. But in my opinion, these are longer term trends. So it's not anything short term. I don't think, I do see a lot of people pointing to the vaccine mandate a couple years ago. I actually don't think that had as big an impact as people think. Because if you're looking at an 18-year-old right now, they weren't thinking about that. They weren't diving into the nuance of
They're 14. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe their parents to a degree, but like, does that mean their parents are holding a grudge from 4 years ago? You know what I mean? Like, the vaccine mandate went away. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things pointing to it. I think we're in a period of time where my generation, broadly speaking, global war on terror, we could look at the 9/11 attacks and say that's the reason I joined. And most of the people that I was in the military with, especially on active duty, that was their thing. That was their event. Why did you join? That. Or my parents served. We don't have that anymore. So an 18-year-old now was, not born when the towers fell?
That's correct.
So how do you relate that to them? Like, what is their thing to want to drive to protect our country or defend freedom or whatever it is? I think that's a part of it. And I imagine if we go back through history, recruiting probably tracks with that. When there wasn't like an overt threat that we could point to or a clear attack on the United States, my guess is it's probably a little harder to recruit. So I think there's a lot of factors. We also have a thinner and thinner pool of people we can pull from. Thinner being the key word there. We got a lot of kids that are a little too big to serve, not physically fit. Medical conditions. I don't know. I mean, look, I still think it's a good option for the right people. I recommend it.
Do you think that the drones in New Jersey might help enrollment in the military as people feel we're under attack?
Yeah, that's it.
Joking
aside, we need to do a better job with that. We need to show that, look, the guys that are probably racking up the most kills in Ukraine right now are doing so behind a keyboard and with a video game controller in their hands. And we need to show our next generation warfighters that, like, it's not all about kicking in doors and shooting people in the face, but actually being able to operate, maintain, control these drones like a video game to a degree, which brings in a whole argument about, is that a good thing or not? But I feel like we're not presenting that as like a viable path to being a contributor on the battlefield, and it very much is.
Do you think it's perhaps a reputation problem? So one of the audience questions was, why did you join the military? I think you just outlined your reason why, right? Was it 9/11? That's the reason you enrolled, or was it your parents served, or?
No, it was 9/11.
When I was 18, it would have been 2015, right? And there was at this time, there was a huge reputation problem, I think, with the U.S. military and the flow of information. Because if you remember the Obama administration, they were very transparent on drone strikes. Well, kind of, but there was every other week we were killing a family with a drone strike, whether it was intentional, right? It was never intentional. They were always just caught in the crossfire, or when the AC-130 blew up the hospital in Afghanistan because they had the wrong coordinates, whatever. I think that kind of soiled the reputation of the military, I guess, up until Ukraine for a while, kind of, because it kind of just seemed like we were just blowing things up, and there was never any attempt to fix it. The transparency was good, but it kind of backfired. And so I think, I don't really know of anyone my age who's in the military. They're always younger or they're older. I think perhaps, I don't know if promoting drone warfare, like you said, helps, but maybe people don't have that same memory, because the 2015 is now 10 years ago, right? The Yemen, remember when they drone struck the wedding in Yemen? That was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So I don't know. I think the reputational damage they suffered temporarily then is maybe gone. But I think that's why you have this recruitment crisis. There's a gap, right?
Yeah, I don't mean to say that like we should be promoting drone warfare. More just we need to do a better job with recruiting and showcasing all the different things you can do in the military. It's not just being a ranger and kicking indoors on the objective. One thing that I think is interesting, we'll kind of wrap up here in a minute, but when we look at recruiting in the military, you think of a wide spectrum. And on one hand, you have people that are going to join no matter what for any number of reasons, right? Their parents serve, they just love G.I. Joe or Rainbow Six or whatever. Like they're going to, you can talk about reputation, you can talk about vaccines, you can talk about whatever you want. That person from the age of 10, like they're going to join. We have that. On the other end of the spectrum, you have people that were never going to join. And my concern sometimes is we listen to that group about why recruiting is down. It's like, right, but you weren't going to join no matter what. And I've had a lot of people over time tell me that, like, well, it's because of the woke ideology of this. Like, hey, listen, you were never going to join. Like, you've always been anti-war. You had a plan to go to medical school, like all these different things. So, like, I got it. That's your perspective, but the military was never something that you were really considering. So I think we have to do our best to kind of separate out those groups. And realistically, those groups make up a big part of the population. A big part of the recruits are people that were always going to join. And a big part of the people that don't serve, they were never going to. So we're really talking about this like relatively small group where the question is maybe. And how are their decisions being shaped? And why is some of that group deciding not to today, whereas 5, 10, 15 years ago, they were saying yes. So it's interesting. It's really complicated. I'm hopeful that we'll get it figured out, but I don't know. I wish I could point to one thing.
Do you think maybe it's like they need better incentives, or do you think it's as simple as Russia crosses, into Latvia, and now the recruitment crisis is solved?
The incentives are apart. 10 years ago, you could join the Army and have an above average pay for education and skill level. That's not the case anymore. Drive down the street here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and you can start at McDonald's at like $15 to $18 an hour. You go across the street to Amazon, no entry skills required at their warehouse, and it's like $20 to $25 an hour. That is more than you will make as a private in the Army. And you don't get yelled at in basic training, and your days aren't 27 hours long, and you don't possibly have to go to war and get shot at. So the financial incentives, I think we've done a poor job with. For a long time, we also offered free college. And now you can get a college loan, which to an 18-year-old kind of feels like free college. Whereas it wasn't an option. You have a lot of people where it wasn't an option to go to college until they had their GI Bill benefits. Now there are other options. And it feels a lot safer, a lot less risky to just get a student loan that people write for an 18-year-old all day, which is crazy. Another conversation. So the military is losing out. It's not the place you go to earn more than you could elsewhere, and it's not the place to go to get free college. So they're falling behind in a lot of that.
Do you think there's a downside to bringing back the draft? Obviously, there are political ramifications, right? Like if you vote for bringing back the draft, you'll probably not get reelected. But in terms of long-term benefit, we're in peacetime. Do you think there are downsides to having a draft? Obviously, the forces would not be professional anymore, but it does fill the gaps, which I believe is 40,000 right now?
Yeah, I think it's all downside at this point. I don't think you'd get people in that it'd be very hard to process through who's qualified, who's not. There's more not qualified today than historically, and I think it would be a net negative, not just for the military, but for society as a whole. I don't think that's who we are. I don't think that would, outside of like, will somebody get elected or not, I don't think the general public would like that. And I don't think it would result in a more lethal or more capable force. We'd fill boots, have seats filled, but I don't know that outside of pure numbers, it would do a whole lot to make us any better.
Interesting. Do you think, I mean, this is kind of related, a little funny note, Top Gun, a movie about Navy aviation, boosted recruitment for the Air Force. So
that's cool.
A little funny there. Yeah, the Navy did not benefit really at all from it. Only the Air Force did. Yeah, went to the Air Force.
I like it. Yeah, beat Navy. There we go.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. Army, Navy, big game. You never hear anything about the Air Force. Is there like Air Force, Navy? Is that a big deal? Army, Air Force?
The rivalry is Army, Navy. And I will hold my bias aside here. But the big old rivalry that goes back 100 plus years is Army, Navy. Air Force, of course, did not exist for the first half of that rivalry. Yeah. So the Army-Navy rivalry is older, much longer history there. Air Force at times has had a really good team. They play for the Commander-in-Chief trophy. So whoever has the best record between Army, Navy, and Air Force ends up with the Commander-in-Chief trophy. The Army Air Force game and then the Navy Air Force game just alternates between home stadiums, and it's just a game during the regular season. So they play every year. I would say it's up there, but it's not anywhere close to Army Navy for like either Army or Navy, really.
So does Air Force even have a rival? Is it like Space Force? Does Space Force have a team? They even have a military academy.
Space Force yet. I did see some Space Force uniforms out at the Reagan Forum. Those are weird. No Space Force team, no Space Force Academy. I believe you can go from the Air Force Academy into Space Force, I think. But I'd put Air Force in the category of like any other school, right? They've got their rivalries out west. I think they're in the Mountain West for football. So they've got their rivalries. It's just they don't have that end of the season Army-Navy thing.
Interesting. If I were Air Force, I would convince U.S. Cyber Command to get a football team. I feel like that'd be a pretty easy win. So,
Air Force has had good teams over the years. Like, there's been plenty of times where they've beat Army and Navy in the same season. So, it's not that they're a bad team per se. They're just not a part of this specific rivalry.
Right. Interesting. All righty. Well, I think that's going to wrap us here. Any last thoughts?
No. Kind of same old grind, man. Back into doing some research as soon as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
And enjoy the conversation. I'll be interested to see the feedback on 2 episodes a week versus 1 and see what we should do with that going forward. So, always learning.
I agree. Agreed. I mean, hopefully the weeks stay as no, I don't want them to stay crazy. What I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, I don't want the weeks to stay crazy. But if they stay crazy, we might be here 2 days a week. Who knows? But yeah, anyways, so that will wrap us, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like it, follow on Spotify, Apple, subscribe on YouTube, give it a like, give it a 5-star review, comment, you share it with your friends, share it with your maybe don't share it with your coworkers, but share it with your family.
Everywhere, yeah.
And have a happy holidays. Are you looking forward to Christmas, Preston? Are you a big Christmas guy?
Yeah, we got the tree up. I'm excited. I don't know. I like kind of relaxing a little bit. We should talk about what our schedule looks like that week, podcast schedule offline, figure out what we're doing.
I looked at it. I think we'll probably be all right. But, yep. Anyways, Christmas coming up, or Hanukkah, I believe, is also coming up if you do that as well. So have a holly jolly Christmas, and we will see you next time.